Just know I need to have one more member, so we have a quorum, so I'm waiting for someone to show up.
Don't want you all breaking into applause when Senator Long comes in, but uh, I've been on the JLCAR for 20 years now, and this doesn't happen very often. We don't have a quorum at 9 o'clock. So anybody know any good commissioner jokes? Sean, I think. Looking around, seeing a lot of familiar faces over the years. Some new folks, they're going like, what's going on here? Don't ask me, I don't know. We want to break into applause when he comes in? Want to do that? Ordinarily, we'd be angry. But if he walks in the door, I'm going to say, okay, because otherwise it's nice seeing all of you.
All right, we're gonna get call JLCAR to order. Just as a understanding, I ran up to the speaker's office and I got Representative Schaumburg quickly appointed to JLCAR. So he's gonna be filling in today for one of the House members. They'll strike it for it, but I've had the verbal approval and the letter will be following, appointing him to JLCAR for the day. So thank you, Tom, for agreeing to sit in. And with that, we'll jump right into the calendar. So the first order of business is approval of the minutes. It's been moved by Representative Schmidt, seconded by Representative Leon to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Excuse me. Can I get some clarification? Yeah, on the alternate seating.
He's going to ask you a question right now. He's going to sit in probably for Representative Lynn, but I'll let you. Any sitting House member.
Okay. Right now, we have an empty space. Okay, so if you appoint and we can sit in for their representative. So we'll put him on this list down here.
Let's just do this. I'll just submit for Bob, okay? And we'll keep it going.
Okay.
Can you have a card up for me?
Not
He's
on.
also-
Oh, yeah, I do.
Sorry, they're figuring out their rules over there. We all set to move forward on the consent calendar? Oh, Tom Schaumburg, Representative Schaumburg.
It's a Schamberg, like a ham, an iceberg. And I know you don't drink, so you would say it just right, okay?
All right, moving on to the consent calendar. Are there any items to be removed from the consent
Actually, I
calendar?
don't think we voted to approve the minutes as a group.
Sorry. All right, all those in favor of the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Hacken Phillips. That's fine.
And did we appoint Representative Schamberg for Representative Lynn?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is a consent calendar. Any items to come off the consent calendar? Staff have anything they want? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar as written and presented. It's been moved by Representative Schmidt, seconded by Representative Leon to approve the consent calendar as written and presented. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The consent calendar is adopted. Moving on to the regular calendar. We're going to take up two items first. There are postponements that we've discussed. So the first item is going to be under the Mechanical License Board, item number 25-241. Senator Reardon had asked that this be postponed, and because she's unable to attend today's meeting and she wants to be able to be here. This does not have a deadline requirement, so we can postpone it to next month. So I'm going to make a motion to postpone until next month. Is there a second? This is seconded by Representative Hacken Phillips. Motion is to postpone 25-241 until next month's JLCAR meeting. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of postponement signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the item is postponed until next month. Next item we're going to look at is under the Board of Veterinarian, item 25-223. And again, we're going to be asked to postpone this until next month, and I'll make that motion myself. Seconded by Representative Hacken Phillips. Is there any further discussion on postponement? Again, this does not need a waiver. Seeing none, all those in favor of postponement signify by saying aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The item is postponed the next month. Is there any other items that anybody wants to postpone or delay? If seeing none, then we'll move into the regular calendar as on the docket. First order of business is Department of Energy, 25-220. The 1,000 rules. The agency come up first.
So this is the Distributed Energy Resources Interconnection Procedures. And I have no substantive comments on the rule text. However, there was more public testimony that was filed that raised a couple of bases for objection. I actually think it's a different basis for objection. So we're looking at EN 108.02 and EO 109.01. And they both have this language about the recover costs associated with the fast track and the supplementary review process. And they originally said that it would be approved by the commission. So the basis for objection is actually beyond beyond agency authority, because the Department of Energy cannot tell the PUC what to do. I've not found PUC authority for this, but the energy also doesn't have the authority to set the fee. In this situation, these rules are regulating a contract. So it's a contract between two third parties, between the utilities and the energy distributors. So what the rule is trying to do is to say, to set this fee for these fast track or supplemental reviews, these are the things you need to consider to set the fee. So it's not going to be going to the PUC. They're going to contractually decide that. And then if there is a complaint or an issue, it can go through 365-1, which is the complaint statute for both energy and the PUC. So the Department of Energy has on your desk, you have a page that has a couple paragraphs. So that has the new language that they would like to supplement. So they have an amended conditional approval right now. This would be an extra, oral approval on top of that. And I think this language fixes the issue.
Great. Agency comments.
Good morning. I'm Amanda Nuna. I'm the Director of the Regulatory Division at the Department of Energy. Thank you for that overview. That was very helpful. Respectfully, the department believes the language it originally proposed, which it did consult with the Public Utilities Commission on, is supported by statute. However, based on comments from stakeholders and other discussions, we did offer this amended language for consideration today. You have the language in front of you. It replaces the language about approval by the commission with language that says the utility fees shall be specific and designed to recover all costs associated with the fast track review process, and then in 1009.01, the supplemental review process. We did, as courtesy, share this information with the PUC yesterday. They like the department, believe what was presented was supportable. However, they don't object to this changed language. So with that amendment and the OLS edits that we've received on our May 8th proposal, we would ask that the committee issue a conditional approval on our revised amended proposal. I'm not quite sure what to call it.
We'll deal with that. Any further discussion? I'll just say that, again, I had several meetings regarding this rule. And again, the issue was in the original proposal, we have a problem where the agency doesn't have legislative authority to set fees. It was in that gap that fell off when we created the Department of Energy, gave them 5 years to use PUC rules. And after that, they were no longer allowed to use it. So they have no authority to set the fees. And then the problem was, we think that PUC, because this isn't a rate case and doesn't deal with ratepayers directly, it deals with developers. We don't think PUC has the authority to set fee either like this, because it's not, they take ratepayer related issues. So this is a developer related issue in recovery. So we asked the agency and various people, and again, what the new process is, it allows the utility to set the fee, but then does create basically an appeals process, supplemental review process. If a developer has concerns with the fees, then go to the Department of Energy and follow their procedures, which are that basically the Department of Energy acts as a mediator in the first instance, trying to resolve the issue between the developer and the utility. And if that doesn't work, then it turns into an appeals process with the PUC, which is part of the already rules and process that happens. So that's what the changes they did was allow the utility to set the fee and then have a review process for it. So.
I was just going to clarify, the statute requires energy to set the cost responsibilities, not the fees.
Correct.
So,
As if I
yeah.
was wrong. The utility sets the fee and they have a responsibility to make sure that every utility has a fee set. That's the regulatory oversight that the Department of Energy has, is saying that every utility, you have to have this documented public form that shows what your fees are to your developers based on the size of the project, basically. And then, so, did I state that correctly?
You did, that's accurate. Thank you.
For any other discussion or comments by the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. We do have a bunch of people wishing to speak. We're going to try to hold everybody to about 2 minutes because we have at least 5 cards on this one issue alone. So first up is Packy Campbell.
Good morning. Give this to the committee members. Packy Campbell, small solar developer, own a company called Bright Spot Solar, also a former state rep. I'm from the Farmington, New Hampshire area. I do a lot of customer generation solar. I have built a large customer generator 1 megawatt project, and I've built a copious amount of 100 kilowatt projects here in New Hampshire. Been doing this for about 10 years. I have a lot of experience with the interconnection process, and it has been difficult. I think we had a robust process on EN 1000. However, I would like to ask this community to preliminarily object, because the concerns that I've been bringing up for the 18 months in this process have not been addressed. The thing I just handed out is simply a copy of the statute. I'm highlighting the first line of the statute. It says, timely, cost-effective, predictable cost for customer generators. The EN 1000 rules start by citing 362A9, Roman numeral 12, has literally the word customer generation in the statute, and says that for customer generators, you can't put additional studies, cost for the transmission equipment on customer generators. It further says that customer generators, you just had this big thing. It was about the fees that you're going to pay. It wasn't about the cost that you're going to pay. The costs that you're going to pay are set what I call Russian roulette. They call it cost causer pays. That sounds great. There's nothing in state statute that allows utilities or the Department of Energy to use cost causer pays. You are creating law that does not exist. Customer generators need to be defined because they're a specific class of distributed energy resource. 362A9 is not just about net metering. It's about giving small businesses like mine and residential homeowners less of a hassle with interconnecting. Specifically, it says you in 362A9:13, Roman numeral 13, says customer generators should be responsible for all costs associated with interconnection. However, that's not a period. It's a comma. And then it says, with the distribution system. The distribution system is a very defined point on the grid. It is the wire at the end of your house. It is not something on transmission lines 5 miles away. Why does this affect me? A 20 megawatt system went on the transmission signs in Farmington, New Hampshire. I'm pro solar. I'm happy to see it. Biggest project in New Hampshire. I will now fail every single screen as a 25 kilowatt small customer generator. I will now go on to additional steps in the process, which are defined. This time, this time, this time. But I know I'm going to be over here in the SIS study because I'm already over on the transmission line what the capacity is. Why did they come there? Because Farmington had 20 megawatts of capacity. So they came there, ate up all the capacity, and now a customer generator, small business is mine. I have 2 projects right now I can't interconnect. I can't even get the estimate for the system impact study. I can't even get what my bill is going to be to study the issue for a cost that I'm not even supposed to be paying. On my 1 megawatt project, I paid for a $26,000 cost to study the transmission line. Then I paid 7 times more to connect to the wire at the end of the street. I don't mind paying 7 times more. I just only want to pay to the wire at the end of the street because I'm a customer generator. I'm a developer. I own 6 mini storage facilities, 5 car washes, On my mini storage facility, when I applied for my interconnection, I got a bill for $3,000. Because they know I do solar, they asked me, are you gonna do solar? I said, yes. The bill went to $21,000 for my same transformer, my same meters. I have absolutely no problem with that. What I had a problem with was holding the project up for a year and a half, paying for a huge study to study how that project affected the transmission grid. I'll pay all my cost to the end of the street for my upgraded transformer and for my upgraded wires so my service can send power back to the grid. The law is clear in 362A9, Roman numeral 12, which is referenced in the first line of EN 1000. That statute is referenced. The first words of this bill that we're here today says customer generators, timely, cost-effective, and predictable. Russian roulette or being the last snowflake on the branch is not an appropriate way. Thank you. Have a good day, guys.
To clarify, customer generators is defined in the statute. There is a statutory definition. It is not defined in the rule, but it doesn't need to be because the statute applies.
All right, moving forward. Chris Skaglund?
Good morning. My name is Chris Skoglin. I'm the Director of Energy Transition, representing Clean Energy New Hampshire. Based on the language that the Department of Energy just proffered and was discussed prior to Mr. Campbell, or the Honorable Packy Campbell, speaking, we would just like to say that we support the proposal with the new language proposed by the New Hampshire Department of Energy, and then thank the department for their consideration of the points that were raised by us on the May 17th JLCAR, but also thank the utilities and the developers for their contribution in this, and then JLCAR itself. Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Next up is Payson Snyder.
Good morning. Payson Snyder, customer generator in Guilford, New Hampshire. I'm here to basically say the same things I did a couple months ago when these rules were delayed again. I, similar to Packy, talked specifically about RSA 362A9, the limitations thereof. Today, I'm going to look at this from the RSA 541 angle. What I just had passed out is 541A22, the validity of these rules. There's two specific sections in these EN 1000 rules. One provides for non-consensual inspection of DERs. I forget the exact, it's the first highlighted section there. It says an agency shall not by rule create for non-consensual inspection. 1018.10 allows for non-consensual inspection. Just to be clear, I'm not talking about the initial inspection when one of these systems goes in. You know, your town inspector comes, they inspect, the utility comes and inspects and says everything's good. I'm talking, this set of rules says 15 years from now, the utility can come into my house, inspect my system, and disconnect me if I don't meet the requirements of ever-changing TIRs and IAs. Which are interconnection agreements and technical interconnection requirements. So it seems to be pretty clearly against 541A22. The other section there is agency shall not delegate rulemaking authority to others, i.e. the utilities. There are IAs and TIRs, again, those are interconnection agreements and technical interconnection requirements referenced throughout the EN 1000 rule set, and these are ever-changing requirements. And sets of rules that you have to meet. In my initial comments that I submitted about a month ago, I did provide boilerplate IAs and TIRs. These are generally boilerplate forms asking general questions. They're not open season for creation of rules that go beyond statute and law. This might seem far-fetched, but the utilities currently do this. In the current PUC 900 rules, for example, there's something that says the utility shall not require this. And then in the existing TIRs or equivalent TIRs, the utility says, we require this, you have to install it. I have a system that's been failed to be granted PTO for almost a year now for that exact thing. So there's a bunch of things in my comments, but overall, I think statutory authority has been exceeded here, and I would recommend the rules be further looked at. So,
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Next up is Lindsay Burgoyne from Revision Energy and Clean Energy.
All right. Good morning, Senator Lang, Representative Leon, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Burgoyne. I'm here today representing Revision Energy, as well as Rewild Renewables, Kearsarge Energy, New Leaf Energy, and Agilitas Energy, who work to develop a significant portion of solar and storage here in the state. I can't say I've been criticized for that before in the legislature. That's good. As you know from our April testimony, the Clean Energy Company sought 2 final changes around fees and additional controls, and understanding changes have been made to address the concerns on fees. As you've heard today from the department, I will speak specifically to additional controls. As discussed again in April, current language allows the utility to charge the applicant for the installation of controls at any time after the execution of an interconnection agreement, essentially leaving the interconnection process open-ended indefinitely, which doesn't really leave the customer with predictability. It's critical to understand that any required additional controls will ultimately impact the owner of the project, not necessarily the project developer. And we anticipate that this would impact larger projects, and here in New Hampshire, those larger projects are municipalities. And so that's why we're here today, is to understand what happens to customers who own projects like Rockingham County, Bedford, Troy, Londonderry, Nashua, Hooksett, Sunapee. Essentially what happens 10 years into operation. And that's, again, why we're here today, is to represent those customers. So as drafted, 101804 kind of lacks express clarity that a customer may be charged only if the additional controls are directly attributable for the customer's interconnection, and the utility bears that burden of proof. And we would ask for that to be in alignment with the cost causer pays principle, which is in RSA 362A913. And that's kind of outlined specifically in the testimony. And generally speaking, to wrap up, interconnection in New Hampshire is governed by cost causer principles, as it is in FERC jurisdiction. And that's all we're asking for. We have always approached interconnection. If you cause it, you pay for it, whether it's at the point of interconnection or beyond. This is a but-for test that's used nationally. And essentially what we're saying here is that if the utility changes technical standards after the project is installed, that shouldn't be the project's responsibility. And policy change should happen prospectively, not retroactively, as we experience in other jurisdictions. It has been mentioned that we agree right now to additional controls language in current interconnection agreements. That is true. That is largely because we don't have an opportunity to negotiate right now because the utilities set those interconnection agreements. There is no governance or rule set. Today, there's a rule set before you that would govern that moving forward, which is why we respectfully ask for change.
Questions from the committee? So Lindsay, I guess,
I'm sorry, are you talking about the April 17th document or the May 8th document?
I believe they're both the same in section 101804 on additional controls.
Okay, thank you.
so Lindsay, if I understand your comment, so, and I'm going to kind of dumb this down because we're all legislators. So the idea that if a utility decides that a voltage change in a line is a good idea, it's good for ratepayers, it's good for the grid, it's a smart thing to do, and it requires you to change gear, you don't think you should be responsible for the cost of changing that gear?
I think that fails the cost causation principle and the but-for.
I'm sorry.
I think that fails the cost causation principle and the but-for test that's applied of the upgrade is triggered by the utility's desire to make a technical change, not by the directly interconnecting customer.
But again, you think that they should hold off on that upgrade because it would cost you a fee and you don't want to pay the fee, or they have to pay the fee, which would go back to ratepayers.
I think that they should consider that on a prospective basis.
I think the texts are not the same for these two. So the current text is the amended conditional approval text. And Energy 1018.04, additional controls has been amended. So it reads, a utility shall not be permitted to require an applicant to install at a cost to the applicant any additional controls or perform additional tests beyond those included in the interconnection agreement to obtain approval to interconnect. The utility shall be permitted at a cost to the applicant to require the installation of controls necessary for safety and reliability that the utility could not have known about at the time of the interconnection agreement was executed. That's not the same text as what's in the testimony. So I don't know if that clears up.
No, that is correct. And in the testimony, essentially what we're asking for is a clarification to that second sentence from May 10th that basically puts the burden of proof on the utility to prove that the issue is borne on the interconnecting customer.
Okay. And again, this is regulating a contract. And generally in contracts, if there was something that was unknown to one of the parties at the time of contracting, it can cause changes in the contract. So that's what I would say on that.
So Lindsay, my understanding again, in the interconnecting contracts now, there is on the individual contract, maybe not in the rule, but in the contract itself,
Yes.
there are conditions that deal with this, that
Yes.
say that, if you're basically causing problems with our power grid, we can require you to fix it, and it's at your cost to fix it. And you can ask for what exactly is going on, and they'll tell you. That's my understanding. So that's already in contracts, isn't it?
That's correct. And we sign that, but that's because right now the utility governs that process. We have asked to negotiate that and they have said, no, that's not negotiable. And so right now this rule set will govern how those interconnection agreements are written moving forward, which is why we're advocating for change in the rule set so that the interconnection agreements would not include that provision moving forward.
So again, I'm trying to understand again, it sounds like if they've identified that there's wave is wrong coming into the grid line, it's causing disruption in the electrical grid, and they can say, you need to fix that, we're going to disconnect you. And that's in current contract. And do you think that's inappropriate?
We do.
Okay.
Thank you. This seems to be a policy question. So a policy about whether what the current contracts are what should be continued forward or not. But this isn't a policy committee. So I think that this concern might be something that's better addressed by having somebody introduce legislation, or am I off base on this? Because this feels like a policy choice.
Can I respond to that? I would just say, I understand that perspective. I think from our perspective, it's out of alignment with the cost cause or pays in RSA 362A913, because it doesn't expressly say that the interconnection customer has to cause the cost. And so that's our concern, is that it's out of alignment with current statute.
Further questions? Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the question that I have is, we can't fix that now, since we're out of session and so forth, but can you live with the current situation until legislation can address that?
I think that's up to you, ultimately. But
That's the question. Is it not?
seems we will have to.
Further discussion? Seeing none. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks.
Next up is Jessica and Michael from Eversource.
Good morning, Michael Licata, representing Eversource. With me is Jessica Chiavara, Senior Counsel for Eversource here in New Hampshire. We'll be brief. Do appreciate the opportunity to testify before you today. First, just want to express our thanks to the Department of Energy and all the stakeholders, the developers, for all their hard work and willingness to work on these rules. I think it's particularly noteworthy that given the length, complexity, and technical nature of the rules, there are a very limited number of issues that are being raised before you. And I think that's a testament both to the department's hard work over numerous months to work with the stakeholders, as well as Senator Lang mentioned his efforts in between the last meeting and today. So I'll turn it over to Jess to just walk through our position on a few issues.
Good morning, committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My first,
Just introduce your last.
oh, sorry, I'm Jessica Chiavar. I'm Senior Counsel for Eversource. My first issue is a minor one. This is a very small change recommended to section EN 101806 titled Additional Equipment. The request is that the word operational be inserted before the word performance that appears in the phrase, as long as the performance of an applicant's DER is not negatively impacted. This is to ensure the rule is only invoked to prevent direct operational harm and not be used to cover indirect economic harms or other tangential impacts to a DER.
Well, I'm sorry, what was the rule number? Sorry.
101806, additional equipment. The company did confer with the DOE on this change, and the DOE did indicate their support for the addition of the word operational. Turning to the issue of 101804, additional controls that was just discussed by Revision Energy, Eversource agrees with Representative Leon that this is a policy matter. The rule as it is written is consistent with RSA 362A9, Roman numeral 13. That rule does not have a causal principle in it. It states that interconnecting customers are responsible for all costs associated with interconnection to the grid. Not necessarily that they are causing those costs, but if it's a cost associated with that interconnection, that it should not be in utility rates, that it should be borne by the interconnecting customer who reaps the benefit of that interconnection. So that is all I have to say on that issue. I will note that the majority of the comments that I submitted on the 17th are now happily rendered moot. The department's language that they submitted today not only resolves the jurisdictional and other legal issues, I believe it sets a standard by which the utilities must set their fees. And it is the correct and appropriate standard given the relevant statutory authorities of RSA 362A9, Roman 13, and SB 391 from the session laws of 2024. I would argue that this new language creates an obligation for the utilities to set fees that are aligned with actual costs. And if anyone that's availing themselves of the 1,000 rules feels that the fees are set inappropriately, not only is there a complaints process authorized by RSA 365-1 and the proposed rules, there's also a technical working group that's created by EN 100502. That working group is comprised by members of the utilities and the developer stakeholders, and that group would meet quarterly, which would provide an informal venue to discuss any issues with the fees, and that might be an even more efficient process than the complaints process. With that said, I believe that with the resolution of the fee issue in 100802 and 100901, this resolves the final remaining contested issue, and this represents the culmination of nearly 2 years of effort of many people from the solar industry and utility experts alike, under the guidance and the leadership of the department, who has exerted a lot of hard work and diligent efforts as well. With this, I am delighted on behalf of the company to make an unqualified recommendation that the committee issue a conditional approval of the rules, and whatever permanent approval would follow that. Thank you.
Give me one more, read back to me where you want to add the word operational.
Yes.
What part of the rule and where, so make sure the staff has it.
Yes, sure.
I'm going to ask the department to come back up and see get their comment on that.
Okay. That is section 101806. It's the section titled additional equipment.
It's on page 37 of your packet.
And it's the phrase, let me get the phrase. It's inserting the word operational in front of performance in the phrase, as long as the performance of an applicant's DER is not negatively impacted, so that it would read, as long as the operational performance of the applicant's DER is not negatively impacted.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
I do have, Mr. Chairman. How long has this causal principle been in effect?
By causal principle, you're referring to RSA 362A9. So I would argue it's not exactly a causal principle, but that statute has been in effect since 1998.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Can I ask the agency to come back up? And ask about this word, adding this word operational to your oral amendment already. And it was presented that you talked about it, you were okay with the addition of that word.
Good morning again. Yes, we think it provides helpful clarification and definition around the word performance.
Questions from the committee? Comments from the staff? Are we okay with operational?
Yeah, I think that's a change that is helpful.
Thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to make the motion. We approve the rule with the conditional approval with the two separate oral amendments that have been made and presented today. So
I'll second.
it's been moved and seconded to approve the rule, the conditional approval with the two additional oral amendments made today. Is there any further discussion?
Could you restate the oral amendments? Again?
Sure. So the first one is that was presented, and you should have this sheet in front of you, Tom. And that's the oral amendment requested by the agency, and this is the one that takes out the PUC out of the mix and creates a supplemental review process of the Department of Energy for conflicts between the utility and the developer. So that's what this first one does, is clean up that. And the second oral amendment was that word operational added in front of performance to further clarify what they mean by performance, the operational performance. I state that right? All right. So any further discussion on Rule 1000, conditional approval with the two oral amendments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the rule is adopted. Thank you, guys. Next up is, where are we? Department of Health and Human Services, Bureau of Aging and Adult Services. We postponed veterinary. Rule 25305.
2025-304.
Hold on. I'm sorry, you're right. 25304.
So what is before the committee today is a revised amended conditional approval. The changes between this text and the amended conditional approval the committee looked at last month are first on page 3, adding additional language to the definition of conflict of interest. And the second is on page 2 of the revised amended conditional approval packet, adding in language to make clear that a CMA can contact the department for technical assistance in locating an applicant. Just to remind the committee, the major concern last month was how the department was ensuring that CMAs were actually contacting participants and providing the services that they're being paid for. The department addressed some of that in their cover letter, stating that they do have an annual review process of a CMA's case records. It is a sample of the case records, but that's done at least annually. And the case records include any communications regarding the services, which would include trying to locate the participant. That annual review is in the proposal. It's in HEE 805.10, paragraphs G through I. Additionally, the currently effective rule has a section regarding quality management, which has been in effect since February 22nd, 2017. One of the changes that the initial proposal, so this has been in the proposal since the beginning, that the department made was also to add in quarterly reports from the CMAs. So those would be submitted quarterly to the department, and that would ensure that once again, services are being provided, would ensure that if there's any major incidents or concerns or problems, those would be going to the department in these quarterly reports. Those reports are on HEE 805.05, paragraphs A and B. So that is the department's way to ensure the services are being provided. Hopefully that addresses the committee's concerns. Besides that, I have no basis for objection on these rules.
Thank you. Department.
Good morning, Nicole Valenzola, Rules Coordinator for the Department of Health and Human Services.
Brian Clark, General Counsel for the Bureau of Adult and Aging Services. And I believe Attorney Rickard has stated the changes to the revised conditional approval succinctly and very adequately, but I'm available for questions.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Don't go far. We have a couple people testifying. We may have more questions for you after they testify. Kearney, and I apologize, Kearney, I can't, Carrie, I guess it is. Begins with, last name is PF. Oh, apologize, it says no. I didn't read that part. Carolyn Virtue.
Good morning.
Microphone.
Good morning. Carolyn Virtue, Granite Case Management. Thank you for allowing me to appear before you here today. I did send a few emails this morning. I worked with the department, specifically Director Lippman and Melissa Hardy, on the 11th and the 12th. And I did not receive a response from them until yesterday, which had the June 15th email to Director Osterhoff. I responded by email this morning because my printer was not working. I have a few comments on certain sections of the rule. The first one is in regard to the quality management. When Chris Herr and I of Legislative Solutions met with Henry and Melissa Hardy on the 12th of June, we discussed with the department the quality management program at length. In the June 15th letter to Director Osterhoff, the department stated that their position is that quality assurance only applies to quality, and I'm quoting from the letter, quality assurance systems created by a home health care provider and not created by regulatory requirements. If the department were unable to implement requirements on CMA aids to ensure quality of services being delivered, the department would be unable to implement the CFI program. This language is circular and not based on the applicable statutes. Where the department is claiming that RSA 151:2B and the associated case management licensure rule does not apply, and that the quality proceedings of case management entities are not confidential, I would like to know what statute they are using to implement their quality measures. I have also attached to the email to this committee the DHHS CM quarterly management report. And that has the requirements in it of what DHHS is looking for in the quality management from the case management providers. With all due respect, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And the department can't assert that what they're asking for is anything other than that which is included in the quality assurance reports and protected as confidential. I would ask that any requirement to submit quality reports to the department be struck. Payment for services. I'm not going to read you the June 15th letter to Director Osterhoff, but I will let you know that on June 11th, for the entire meeting, for a half hour, Henry, Melissa, and I discussed the reimbursement rate issue. The information that is now stated by the department was never raised during that meeting or the June 12th meeting, nor was it included in any previous discussion in regard to this rule. The department provides a reason for the move to the monthly rate. I have gone back through that at length, and that reason is included nowhere in those discussions. For your reference, I've included the state plan amendment, which was approved by CMS in regard to the change from per diem to monthly. And it's not mentioned anywhere there. I also have documentation of discussions with the rationale for that change being you can't bill for 5 days a week, which is how the department had it set up, every week if there weren't being services provided on each of those days. So that was the rationale. So I don't know if they made that up this week after the meetings or what. It is clever, but it's not true. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was the assignment of CFI participants. The department is asserting, and I'm paraphrasing to try to keep within 2 minutes, and I know I failed already. The department is exhibiting concern about patients' languaging. I received a referral a few weeks ago where the patient was seen 140 days and assessed to be in need of CFI services and left in the community by the department languishing until referral to my agency. So I would say the department is barking up the wrong tree here. The case management agencies are making a sincere effort to locate these individuals upon receipt of the referral. But until we locate the participants, especially where they haven't been seen from 60 to 147 or more days. We should be, this clock should start ticking when we find the recipient. This is a very fragile population, and they are not always where they were 147 days ago. So if you want to talk about languishing, that's where the languishing starts. The data set identified in this rule needs to start from the date of contact with the patient, not at the date of referral. Thank you.
Questions for Carolyn?
Mr. Chair, I do have a question for one of the attorneys over there who's, when it was mentioned that the reports, they're confidential, or
The quality management reports.
yes.
Yeah.
Are they confidential? Do they fall under the HIPAA regulations?
So I'm going to quote from the department's report of public summary of public comment with the final proposal. It seemed like this issue was brought up there. And their response is that, and I agree with this analysis, that the department's authority for these quality assurance reports is under RSA 151E, which authorizes the department to administer the Choices for Independence program and adopt rules governing the provision, oversight, and monitoring of Medicaid-funded Choices for Independence, CFI, services. The statute that Ms. Virtue referred to earlier has to do with private case management services, not the ones that that give these services under Medicaid. So the department does have an obligation under the statute, under 151E, to ensure that services are being provided, not just for fraud purposes, but also to ensure that they can continue to provide this program and the federal government doesn't take it away from the state.
Further questions? Sina, think you have something to respond?
I have two comments and a question. First of all, the document that you were provided about the pre-rulemaking, HE 801, was drafted by the department, and it was not from written comments that the MCAC members provided. And at the time that that document was disseminated, there was objection by the members to the document that is being re-disseminated now. There were written comments from the MCAC subcommittee, which the department has not included here in their response to these questions. I included one of them in one of my responses. The other thing is the HEE one, the confidentiality rule is for licensed provision of case management services under the HEP 819, and that licensure is required in the HEE 805 and the 801. So that is not just for private services, services provided privately. And the Bureau of Health Facilities comes in annually and inspects that we have that quality assurance for all patients, including the CFI patients.
Questions from the committee? Caroline, I just have one. Do you think it's appropriate for the department to have, so basically, it sounds like as part of the licensure requirements, you have to have a quality assurance program to make, that you follow in order to make
Yes,
sure
that we-
patients see all the, get the services they're supposed to get. How would the state verify that you're doing you're doing those services and you're doing the quality assurance on top of providing the service? Don't you think it's appropriate for the state to basically check your checking?
I do think it's appropriate, and I think the Bureau of Aging and Adult Services should do it just like the very professional Bureau of Health facilities. They come in, they sit there with our quality binder, they read, they flip through it, but they don't take it with them.
Okay.
So that's how I think it should be done.
And if I
And I
understood
have no objection to it being done that way.
your other comment around fees was, it sounds like, and I'll ask the agency this when they come back up, but around fees, that once you accept the referral, they start paying you for your efforts for trying to find the patient that you're working with, the individual you're working with. And you think that shouldn't start until after you've already found them.
I don't accept any patients currently until I've made a contact with them, because I don't want to expose myself to fraud and abuse through an error. So you, as a provider, you have to have checks and balances. My checks and balances, unless we've made a contact with an individual or their designee, we do not accept them and admit them for services. And I know everybody is sick of hearing it. I get referrals of dead people. I get referrals of people who are permanently placed in nursing homes. I get referrals of people who have moved out of state. None of these people are appropriate for case management services. So I should not be forced to accept them to make the department's languishing of cases look good for them.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Agency, do you want to come up and comment on anything?
Thank you. Brian Clark, General Counsel for the Bureau of Adult and Aging Services, and I have with me
Christina Ickes with the Bureau of Aging and Adult Services.
So I guess to start off, I'd like to address some of the concerns. The delay in processing long-term care applications is a problem. It's a problem the department has been working on. There was legislation introduced, and we've been contracting with a consulting group to work on the problem. It is getting better, but it is still an unfortunate problem, and I acknowledge that. In addition, the Bureau requires things of case management agencies because they are a central piece to the Choices for Independence program, and that is the quality service reports that we request. So the reason it doesn't violate the confidentiality of quality assurance committees is essentially like if there was a mortality committee or another specific quality assurance review committee, records of that committee, the minutes would be privileged, but not the patient records. So you can't assert a quality assurance privilege and make the records that you were even treating a patient privileged. That's the position of the department, that a quality assurance committee reviewing something doesn't mean that becomes absolutely privileged.
Questions from the committee? Okay, we're all set.
Thank you.
Any more comments from the staff?
Just very quickly, with regard to the rate of reimbursement, I know we talked about this last meeting, but I just wanted to reiterate There was a discussion about whether these case management services fell under RSA 161.4, which is the providing of medical services under Medicaid. And it was determined that those services do fall under that particular statute, which means that it is exempt from rulemaking. So that's why there's nothing about fees in this rule. I just wanted to make that clear that it's because they're exempt from rulemaking.
Further comments? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Oh, Mr. Chair, there was a note at the end of the packet, the meeting packet, about a possible legislative intent issue. Did we sufficiently cover that?
So we talked about it briefly, and it's just because the statute uses the term medical providers, and there was a question of whether case manager was a medical provider. And that was the suggestion for the legislative intent, because apparently the department did receive comments and we received comments that the rates of reimbursement should be in the rule. So I thought perhaps cleaning up the statute would make that clearer and keep that from being an issue moving forward. That was the reason for that.
Added to our spreadsheet of legislative fixes someone might take up in the fall. Any further discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion? I'll make a motion. I move to approve the rule, the amended, hold on, we got revised amended conditional approval request as presented on the June 10th proposal.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt. I will say that I appreciate the agency clarifying things like the telehealth that we had talked about. I recognize that there is a potential of paying case management agencies for work that they're doing that may end up ultimately be someone who moved out of state or anything else. But I think if we don't do that, nobody wants to take a case, right? Because there's going to be work that's happening that they're obligated to hire staff to do that they're not getting any reimbursement for. I think the agency's done a pretty good job of trying to tighten up the timeline for making sure that this isn't a 6-month feeding trough, where people just keep chasing somebody for 6 months. And I think you tighten some of those rules up to make sure that we don't have that situation going on. But I also think that agencies have to accept the patient, they have to accept the case so that somebody knows something's happening and it's not just hanging there. And I do appreciate, again, with the agency, I know in HB2, we put money for that contractor to be able to do the long-term care, certification faster. So patients are moving out of hospitals and getting into services where they belong. So I appreciate the agency doing that as well. Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you said going in, Attorney Park, that you're working on it, things are getting better. That's good to hear. I'm not being facetious. That's good to hear. But that's such a generic remark. And the question is, you start here with an unacceptable situation. You're working on it. It's getting better and so forth. How much progress have you made? How much have you gotten to an acceptable, workable arrangement where people are getting the care that they need and the agencies are being protected from situations where, as I'm led to believe, where they're being kind of handed something, the clock starts running and they're going like, we don't have any idea where this person is, whether they're alive or dead or whatever. That strikes me as too much of a rubber bag. I need to hear more with regard to how much better you've gotten and how much less the agencies are putting into a situation which is not functional or not sufficiently functional anyway. Can you speak to that?
So I would have to confer with my colleagues at the Bureau of Family Assistance to get firm numbers on what exactly the timeline for processing long-term care applications was and is. I do believe it is in the area of, it was around 120 days and now it's down to 45, those being averages.
I mean, the question is, it's kind of like how long can you hold your breath? And to the degree that it's gotten better, but you're still holding your breath. That, I'm not clear as to whether we're into a situation of acceptable functionality. Can somebody speak to that?
Well, we are still working on the problem with the consultant we hire on processing long-term care applications faster, which would reduce the amount of time that people go between medical eligibility assessment to case management agency assignment. So we are still working on it.
So, Peter, if I may.
Thank you. So, and are you working with people like Ms. Virtue, who seems to be extremely knowledgeable and experienced, and to the degree that those people are still in kind of a limbo situation where nobody coming into it and looking at it from the outside would say, well, that works. And so are you working with them and getting input and incorporating that into a way that's making real progress?
You want to speak to that?
Sure. Hi, sorry, Christina Ickes, Bureau of Aging and Adult Services. On the side of the Bureau of the Aging and Adult Services, the Bureau convened a work group with the case management agencies, for example, among the tasks with the Commissioner's Roadmap for making eligibility easier, to shorten the Medicaid eligibility assessment. And that instrument was shortened from 14 pages to 3 working pages plus 1 page of instructions through the work of the work group with the input of case management agencies like Ms. Virtue's.
So again, I think it's great progress going from 120 days to 45 days, considering the first effort is getting rid of the backlog, right? And then it allows you to take cases on a more steady festival. I expect it'll get better. And I also understand that, again, it was just an HB2, right? So they've had a year with the budget, and that contract took a while to get through the governor and council to boot. And so they're doing great. Again, I'm happy to see progress, and I'm hoping we'll still continue to see progress. So. All right, so the motion is to approve with a revised conditional approval on 25-304. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and it is adopted. Moving on to the Department of Safety. Thank you, guys. 2611.
So 2611 is the various motor vehicle inspection rules, which have been changed to safety rules. I would like to say that I have no more substantive comments on the actual rule text. The agency did a great job of taking the statutes that were repealed and removing the rules that they didn't have authority for any longer. So that has been great. However, since the rules have been in the process, HB 649 has been signed into law by the governor. And this transfers, instead of inspections by the Department of Safety on cars, the citizens are required to maintain a safe car. The statute also requires law enforcement officers to enforce the safety of the cars, and it imposes a $60 fine for violations and only 7 days to cure the violation. So the question that I have raised is whether these can be uniformly applied and how they would be uniformly applied, and how a reader, an average citizen driving down the road, would know. Also, how a law enforcement officer might know when they pull somebody over if they're violating the statute.
Agency comments.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
Let the agency speak.
Could I just ask one quick question? Mr. Chair, when does that statute go into effect?
It started in May. It was, I think, May 18th, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. John Marasco, Director of the DMV.
Jennifer Bailey, Assistant Director of DMV.
I'd like to thank Attorney Munez for that overview. As was stated, the division is seeking approval of this safe vehicle requirements rule set. This rule set comes before you today with the repeal of the New Hampshire State Inspection Program, the passage of House Bill 649, which is relative to the maintenance obligations of motor vehicle operators, which includes, in the addition, 266:A-B, which is operator vehicle maintenance, which is now included in RSA 266, which applies to all equipment of vehicles. So this rule set removes all references to the previous New Hampshire State Inspection Program. I want to recognize Deputy Director Melissa Riley and Assistant Director Jen Bailey with the guidance from the Department of Safety Assistant Commissioner Steve Lavoie for making sure that this rule set was essentially ready for your review and that those references to the State Inspection Program were removed. The other portion of the rule set, it fulfills the agency's requirement and statute to draft rules as outlined within sections of RSA 266, equipment of vehicles, as well as RSA 260:5, rulemaking authority. And I think the importance there is when you look at what's included in 266, there are so many different sections of it that some specifically require the agency to do what we're doing today and create a rule set. Ultimately, this rule set provides for standards which align with RSA 266, and it offers residents throughout New Hampshire greater clarity on those safe vehicle standards to make sure that we maintain safe roadways and stay in compliance with the RSA. Assistant Director Jen Bailey has some examples that she could provide of why this rule set is so important and why we support it, if you'd like to hear those as well.
So as the director stated, we devised these rules to be guidance to the public on and dealerships as well as garages on what qualifies as a safe vehicle. If you look at 266, there's many parts of that that remain that were not part of the inspection program, and that relied on what your wheels look like, what your tires were, your chassis, but they left them very vague. For example, 266:27, brakes required, only states every motor vehicle driven upon ways of the state shall be provided with adequate brakes in good working condition. This rule set in front of you further certifies that. It clarifies what that actually means, that your brakes should not be like the depth of them and what should be worn down as a safe vehicle. Again, another part of 649 that passed also has guidance to dealerships when selling a vehicle that they have to either certify they conducted a safe vehicle inspection, that they did not conduct that, and that they recommend the safety of the vehicle. This provides them that guidance as well. There will be other rulemaking in another rule set for dealerships that would refer to this rule set for that guidance as well.
And if I could just add to that, I want to thank Attorney Muniz for the question that she posed, and we have conferred with the Department of Safety Commissioner's Office. We do have Lieutenant Thomas Conlon from the New Hampshire State Police Troop G here today with regards to the training. So I think one global answer would be anytime there's a change to statute that requires any agency, in this case law enforcement, to provide for a level of training to make sure they can satisfy the statute. That training, according to the Commissioner's Office, will be provided for, and Lieutenant Conlon can certainly speak further to that. I also want to thank Director Osterhout and his team for the valuable feedback that we got from OLS to make sure that this rule set was ready for today. So thank you.
Comments from the committee. Representative Land.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for pulling out all of the extra parts that made things very, very complicated. But I'm concerned that what's in here is still too complicated for a roadside look from an officer. I just want to pull back to some experience I had 25 years ago. One of my first roommates out of college, her dad was with California Highway Patrol. One of the things that they did with new California Highway Patrol officers, and everybody knew this, was they had to bring their own personal vehicle in to flag any deficiencies in the California standards for what a vehicle needed to have on the road. They never had a single trained California Highway Patrol candidate who brought in a car that did not violate some of those. With looking at this, I think this is more complex than somebody can actually do on the roadside. And I think something that's more distilled and more brought down to the key roadside metrics to send them in to confirm or deny whether or not this is an unsafe vehicle would lead to greater consistency in application. Because right now, looking at this as detailed, nuanced, and professional or car professional oriented as this language is, you can't expect your average officer to really know the difference here. And then we get into a really tricky situation where some people may be deemed to have unsafe vehicles when other people operating the very same vehicle might be deemed to have one that is safe. Unfortunately, people are humans and sometimes biases come in. And that's why we need to make sure that the rules that we have are very clearly enforceable and clearly understandable so that any personal biases don't come in. You know, maybe I don't like red cars. So every red car, if I was an officer, would sort of already ping on my radar, and those I would spot more problems than one that's a white car. A blue car. Sorry, but just any of these situations, and I think they're far too complex for equal application on the roadside, and I'm very, very concerned about the consequences of that.
Thank you, Representative Leon, for that question. The RSA 266:8-B, the operator of vehicle maintenance portion that was added here through HB 649. Much of what's in there, and I know Lieutenant Chris Storm from the New Hampshire Office of Highway Safety, who was the driving force behind this addition, the training that would go along with the roadside review of the vehicle certainly consists of things that are visual, right? Things that, you know, the tires clearly are not fit for the roadway, the windshield is cracked, some of the lighting issues, things that you can identify right there at roadside. Training could be provided to address those. When it comes to some of the things that are in the rule set, to your point, and I agree with you, that are definitely more micro than what's included in the RSA. For those types of things that also relate to safe vehicles and are important to have, you're going to need the assistance of a trained professional to identify those. And that doesn't mean you can't take enforcement action after the fact. It may not be a situation where you can take the enforcement action at that moment at roadside. For example, with the brakes. You know, in many cases, you know, if there was a failure of equipment on a vehicle, that would have to be something that's reviewed after the fact, put up on a lift and identified by a trained individual that can identify the fact that those brakes were not roadworthy, and that could have been part of the causation to this particular, if we use a crash, for example. But that information could be served back to law enforcement that could then be utilized for enforcement action. So I think you have a hybrid here. I think you have certain things that will be visually inspectable at roadside that training could be provided for. And then part of the training could be, those are things that we can't determine at roadside, but that could be sent to a professional to provide feedback that you could then use to further your case.
And then as a follow-up, I don't see the part in the rules where there's that discretion, where there's that guidance about what is a clear violation and what's being sent for either a fix or a follow-up ticket. I think that taking the scope of what was passed and taking it down to that micro level is sort of a broader interpretation than I know I was expecting from what we passed. But I think that including some of that guidance about what is a roadside ticket and what is seeking further information would help address the potential unequal application of the law, whether, you know, it's my mother driving a car or my teenage son driving a car.
Very good. Thank you.
Representative Hecken Phillips and Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, to what extent have you spoken with legal counsel about the potential for unlawful searches based on the criteria for an unsafe vehicle? As you mentioned before, that there are visual cues that can be seen from a distance from a vehicle, but it occurs to me that there are several points on this rulemaking list that would be unseeable from the roadside. So my question is, this seems very fraught for potential violations of constitutional rights, and I'm wondering what your legal analysis was for this.
Thank you for the question, Representative. That we haven't had extensive conversations about in particular. I think one thing that we certainly asked when we went through this process of generating this rule set for your review today was, where did these roughly 40 pages of information come from? What's the history? How did they, because a lot of what's in this rule set was previously approved by this body, by JLCAR. But we had to ask ourselves, because now it had to be a we had to move on this. Bills are passing. We've got to do something to fulfill our rulemaking statutory obligation. And so we actually were looking at, and Jen did a lot of work on trying to compare and contrast, okay, these sections within RSA 266 require rulemaking. Okay, so that gives us the authority. We need to be doing that. But then if you look at what was there and what's been taken out, what's left behind, where does it come from? And so based on our analysis as best we can determine at this moment, a lot of it comes from NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, best practices and standards, as well as from vehicle manufacturers, and quite frankly, maybe from some other sources. But that's where the majority of what you see in the rule set that goes micro, because we at the DMV certainly would not be able to just craft that language based on our lack of expertise in that area.
I just have a quick follow-up. So it's my concern that we're trying to like deconstruct a rule. Well, we're basically reestablishing rules from a deconstruction of a law that is not valid any longer. So we're kind of like reverse engineering the rules. And I do believe that there will be constitutional vulnerability based on that. I'm not sure how law enforcement has consistent application of identifying which vehicles are safe and unsafe based on this set of criteria in a way that doesn't infringe on people's rights. I am quite concerned about that. I think we're in a tough spot as rulemakers. I'm worried about the public interest in this situation. I don't know if you can foresee. Representative Leon did mention a few circumstances there may be unequal application of the rules based on a certain person's, kind of hidden biases. So, I really worry about putting the state in a position that would cause us to be infringing on other people's rights based on this individual analysis that's not clear. So I guess I'm foreseeing some concern, but I guess I would leave it to the OLS attorney to also comment if she felt necessary.
Peter? Okay, so I was thinking maybe perverse engineering as I was listening, and I also have a white car, so right away my ears pricked up when Representative Leon was making her remarks. But even though I sounding a little bit humorous here, this is an issue that I am extremely concerned about and have been following very closely, because I fit into several of the categories that I think are kind of up in the air here. So we have the service community that is certainly impacted by the change in the amount of business that they are experiencing, and whether I realize that some of this is policy, and the chairman will keep me from going too far afield. But the thing is, some of this is policy, and I understand, but the bottom line is we have businesses out there who are, I think a number of them, a certain percentage of them are in real jeopardy as to whether they're going to continue to survive. That's one thing, but we also have this giant population that has vehicles that they're driving and are kind of very uncertain about whether they need to get inspected. Are they home free? Where are they in all this? I went in and had my car inspected just yesterday, or day before, because I want to drive a safe vehicle, and I think most people are in that category. They want to drive a safe vehicle. The question is, what impact is all of this going to have on their obligation to go and have it inspected or maintained and so forth? And the enforcement issue has already been addressed and so forth. But also the feds are out there, and I don't know where we are, because I know that I read that we have some kind of a federal involvement, intervention here with regard to what the legislature did, and what the state now is confronted with meets the state the federal stat requirements and so forth. And so this is inordinately complicated, and this is a hot potato that you've been handed. And so can you speak to any of that?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Representative Schmidt, for the question and your thoughts on that. There will be, the DMV is charged with creating several rule sets at the moment, making sure that we address school bus safety and having a rule set or parameters for that, as well as what's provided here in 266:8-B and HB 649, ultimately making sure that the provisions for dealers, what the expectation is for dealers, which is provided for within statute, but a rule set that would also be forthcoming for that as well. So we are working on those. Those will be produced soon. And if I could too, on Representative Hacken Phillips, if I could just respond, you bring up great points, and I just want everybody to know that we were charged to take a look at what could we do to create a rule set that would pide for safe vehicles with the changes that have happened at the state level. And so we try to be very respectful in working with the Commissioner's office on what's here in the rule set that worked, that would still complement the statute, that would fulfill our obligation to create rules as is laid out in RSA 266 in many sections, because another alternative is you simply don't have a rule set. And you just, and we had these conversations. Do we need to have a rule set, or should you just require and default to statute? But to Jen's example that she just gave, there are those sections in there that are not clear for the public and would not give people the information that they need to be successful. And that's where the rule set comes from. And I think that, to your point, Representative Hacken Phillips, I look at 266:8-B, and I see the section here where it talks about any defect that permits exhaust gases to enter the passenger or cargo compartment. Well, you're not going to be able to identify that at roadside, most likely, but that will be something where if it led to somebody becoming lightheaded that led to a crash, or it led to a death because of the fumes that were making their way into the vehicle, that still would be something that law enforcement would follow up on, but it would have to be in tandem with a trained professional to feed that information back to law enforcement to further the investigation. So it's like you have the RSA, which makes it very clear in many ways on the visual front, but sprinkled in there are some things that then tether to the rule set for the things that have to take place behind the scenes to have a trained professional serve that information back to law enforcement.
And I think just to add to that, our intent of this, and maybe we have to reword some things, is not for this to be what's guiding roadside. The 266 8A or 8B, is it 8A? 8A is going to be what guides roadside. This is more intended to just further clarify what's remaining in 266 as to what your safe vehicle looks like. So we don't want this to be tied to that. We don't expect, we know law enforcement's not going to measure your tread depth roadside. This is more just what we wanted to set forth as the standards of a safe vehicle, more to the director's point of if there's a serious or fatal crash and that goes through an crash analysis, if these things didn't meet, that's what could be found as deemed as the fault of the accident.
Representative.
Thank you. I do want to just bring up that just the complexity of the rules and the unequal application of the rules, even at state certified inspection facilities, is one of the things that led to the full-on repeal. So I appreciate what you've been doing trying to work through this, but I really think that we need to give you more time in order to bring something in where maybe instead of just taking the red pen to pull things out, you instead start on a new document to see what is actually required with clarity. I'm not sure if the best way to do that would be a postponement with time or a preliminary objection because of this being contrary to the public interest, because it can't be uniformly applied and is unclear on how they'll be enforced. I think that those are probably the two best paths to get to something that works, because I would not be comfortable in any way, shape, or form doing anything but a final objection if we have something from this, so that the burden then becomes on the department if there's any conflict, because we've seen in some of these other rules, once we've approved something, you can't really walk that back. And the last thing I want to do is approve something that is questionable, that puts people's constitutional rights at risk, and then not be able to walk that back if we then have different people in these seats. Because I know that I've worked with both of you. I think that your intentions are correct in this, but we also have to recognize that just the process of government just builds on what we have done. And we can't approve something that can be so inconsistently applied.
If I may, thank you, Representative, for that feedback. And again, I just want to state the DMV was charged with, the decision was made, it will be a rule set as opposed to relying on the RSA, and that's where we started to go to work. But I can tell you that we would certainly support the preliminary objection. We think that's a one, and we were prepared for that today. By all means, take the extra time. And what I would ask the committee is, would it be possible to establish a multidisciplinary working group to get together to go through these rule sets? I mean, we're doing the best we can at the agency level, but we'd certainly love to partner with elected officials and make sure that we get this just right. That's something that's going to come through the body and pass. And we'll also, Representative Hacken-Phillips, have that additional legal review on whatever is parsed down or agreed upon. So I don't know if that's an opportunity to do something like that, or if that's outside the box.
So a preliminary objection would allow the agency 45 days to respond. And then after that, JLCAR has 50 days to respond. So if you want to do a preliminary objection based on public interest, you could do that. And you could make a recommendation along with that to do a working group of some kind.
Before we do that, because I haven't had a chance to speak yet. Before we jump to motions, so I guess from the committee and the conversation, I'm still trying to understand, this rule just sets details, right? What is a bad tire? What is a bad windshield? What is a bad, exhaust system, right? It sets definitions and details as to what an unsafe vehicle is. As someone who wore a badge for a long time, if we don't pass a rule, you are leaving this utterly to the discretion of every individual police officer to make a decision on what these things are. And I think that makes it even worse for our citizens than better if we don't do something. In my general opinion, I think that without a definition of what an unsafe tire is, whether it's just low on tread or the fact that fabric is showing, right, is a clear violation, and the car should be pulled off the road, because every citizen has an obligation to make sure the vehicle that's on the road is safe, right? They have that obligation. I walk up and I see a car on the side of the road, I pull somebody over for speeding and they've got bald tires with threads showing. Pretty sure I don't want that car continuing down the road, right, as a police officer, right? But what justification are we going to give them if we don't pass this rule to take that car off the road, other than the generic statute that says the same thing? Unsafe cars aren't allowed. And yet we don't define what unsafe cars are because we turned down the rule that defines what an unsafe car is. So I think we put the citizens more at risk if we don't approve this rule. We can form any multidisciplinary review further how this looks. And I do think that training is a major issue, right? That law enforcement needs to be trained appropriately to make sure they understand what this looks like. Even as I read the statute, we have conflict, because in one section it says you may issue a DE tag, an defective equipment tag. In the very next section it says you shall issue a ticket for $60. And we have the same two sentences right next to each other. So is it a may or a shall? The statute's got problems that we passed under that last section. So my concern is doing nothing makes it even worse for our citizens, because there's no definition for law enforcement to what's unsafe and what is the details beyond that. And that truly leaves it to the Wild West of law enforcement and puts us at more risk for suits for constitutional infringement, because this officer decided it was a headlight and a taillight that was necessary in order to consider it unsafe and tow it. But this guy just decided it's a headlight. And now we have difference in opinions on what it looks like. So I think training does need to happen. I don't think that falls under this section of the law in the definitions. So that's my concern, is doing nothing. We preliminary object, I suppose it gives them 45 days, but I don't see anything in there that in the rule itself that says they shall or do anything. It's just definition on How is a tire unsafe? What do the exhaust system look like? What's the windshield look like? They're just definitions on what is defined an unsafe windshield, so that a law enforcement has guidance to be able to act. If we don't do this, they have no guidance. It's just strictly what's in the law, which says an unsafe vehicle can't be on the road. Good luck with that. So that's sort of I'm not sure where you want to go with it, but I think by not passing it, we have a bigger problem.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my understanding that if we do the preliminary injunction and keep working through this, we'll still have the existing rules that provide that backstop to some extent.
That's correct. The rules are on the 14A extension under 541A. So the current rules remain in effect until the rulemaking process is over. So the preliminary objection would extend that, as would a postponement. But you would need a waiver for a postponement because today is the deadline.
Okay. Thank you. And if I
So
can.
the question is, what would we be adding to the rule other than these definitions that we think are necessary in order to do constitutional protections or in an application, in equal application of law? What are we going to add? This is a definition rule set that defines what is tires and exhaust and windshields and those kind of things. This isn't an employment rule, right? Telling police officers, state police, this is how you're enforced. That's not what this rule set is. So now is it the idea we're going to add training requirements into this rule set about definitions?
If I can, the idea in my mind is to ensure that what we have in this is something that can be understood and applied at the roadside level. There could perhaps have, this is the general roadside application, and these are the further details that in the case of investigating a crash or something else, but these ones where you're measuring where some of the specificity that can't be done safely on a roadside, those ones can exist as part of the definition of the unsafe vehicle, but there's only certain ones that really would rise to the level of that roadside inspection. It's obviously we're going to need more clarification in the statutes about how we can do a fix-it ticket, because I think a fix-it ticket where you can go and determine if that's the case. But there were so many bills going on. I didn't hop in on this one to try and put my 2 cents in, because I think I've run out of 2 cents with a lot of people. But when it comes down to it, ensuring rules that we have that are applied at the roadside can be understood by the person operating the vehicle and the person looking at it on the side of the road is the best way to avoid lawsuits that are based upon a thought that either it truly has been an unequal application or somebody that feels that it's an unequal application. The clearer the rules are for the roadside flagged unsafe violations, the less ambiguity there is. The more consistently it can be applied, the more we can get these large, big picture issues that clearly everybody agrees are clearly known and clearly understandable. And then we keep working towards this better refinement. But right now, I just see we're setting everybody up for failure. And the last thing we need to do is just set ourselves up for failure and legal challenge. So I'd just like to keep it going with the preliminary objection, trying to get to something that can be understood, can be equally applied, and then just keep working through the process, because I know we've already charged them with quite a bit of other rulemaking. We want to make sure that what we can get through is digestible by people, and then we can keep improving that.
Further discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do question whether these rules would be void for vagueness under basic legal analysis as they're written. I think there are constitutional concerns as presented, and I don't believe it's appropriate for JLCAR to approve something that we understand to be questionable, just for the basis of helping, the people on the ground. I think we have an obligation to try to improve it before we pass a set of rules. So I think the appropriate move would be to preliminarily object.
Well, I think this discussion is really, really important we have an opportunity with people who've got a lot of experience in legal, professional, personal, and legislative sides. We've got a good group of people here to come up with some kind of initial decision And I'm leaning in the direction also of a preliminary objection, which keeps things going and so forth, and gives us time to 45 days to make it better. I don't think there's any question that more can be done with more time. No, so I'm happy to have the legal side weigh in or the director to speak. I'm here for the duration. Well, I mean, who knows how long it'll last, but
Make the motion if you
Thank you. I'd like to move to preliminary, let me pull up my language. Preliminary object to the rules being contrary to the public interest because they cannot be uniformly applied and it is unclear how they will be enforced. And further, I would request that we form a working group in order to move to success as soon as possible on this, if that's an appropriate form for the working group. Otherwise, amended as necessary.
I believe we also need a waiver. Is
Can
that
we
correct?
define hold on, before we go, Gus. Can we create a working group to work on a rule? That's not something in 10 years of sitting on JLCAR I've ever heard done before.
You can kind of recommend whatever you want.
Great. All cars are safe. We're done. Let's go home. All right, so it's been moved so that I assume you're going to amend it to include the waiver requirement.
As a preliminary objection doesn't require a
Don't
waiver
require a
because it starts a new clock.
Okay. So the motion is to preliminary object and to form a working group to work with the agency. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, how does this motion deal with what you just expressed on your thoughts on this?
I'm going to be voting against the motion, so, again.
Just checking in.
These are definitions that can easily be understood. I think, fabric break in a tire, a cut and break, weather crack in a tire, these are all easily defined things. These are
That's
not
good.
action items.
welcome to JLCAR.
So, anyway.
I believe you
further
need a
discussion?
second.
It's Peter's second.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, Peter.
Any further discussion? So the motion is to preliminary object in the form of working group. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. No. So the ayes have it. You're no. Well, actually, we just split the committee. So your preliminary objection motion fails. That being said,
I'll make
A new
them.
motion.
Can we?
So I'll do this. I'll make a motion. We postpone for 30 days and grant a waiver. That will do that, and that'll give more time to be able to look at it. I still think it's problematic, but I'll agree to a 30-day waiver. A postponement and a 30-day waiver to give Representative Leon and Representative Hacken-Phillips time to meet with the agency, talk through their concerns, and see if there's any amendments they can make before next month.
I'll second that motion.
What does that do in terms of the current rules?
So the current rules are still in effect through the rulemaking process. That would continue the rulemaking process. But I just want to clarify, do you want a 30-day waiver or do you want a waiver to the next JLCAR meeting, which is July 16th?
To the next JLCAR.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Mr. Chair, I did have further discussion. I just wanted to mention that our state is currently litigating several issues that have been deemed unconstitutional for the basis reason of its vagueness. And I believe that we're setting ourselves up into another situation where litigation will follow based on these rules. I think it's worth noting that that is not free. That is taxpayer money that goes into defending that litigation. And putting these rules in place, I believe, is probably a mistake.
Thank you, and you're welcome to have, I send you and Representative Leon can chat with the agency and see if you can find a thing. I think a definition, a clear definition isn't going to be in violation or considered vague myself, but that's my opinion.
And just as discussion, I agree completely with Representative Hacken-Phillips.
So the motion is to postpone to the next meeting and grant a waiver until that time frame and to give time for Representative Hacken-Phillips and Leon to work with the agency. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and it's postponed and waived until next month. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Next up, Department of Environmental Services. 2650.
Can we take just a little break maybe?
Sure, why don't we take a 5-minute break, and we'll come right back in 5 minutes. See everybody at, yeah. All right, guys, we come back into order. Everybody can take their seats. And we're going to move to the Department of Environmental Services, Solid Waste Programs, 2650.
Yeah, this is the PFAS Products Control Program. And at last month's meeting, there was a discussion around what would trigger the department's request for a certificate of compliance from product manufacturers. And so the item was postponed to allow the agency time to draft some language to address the committee's concerns. Those concerns were that not having criteria in the rule will lead to arbitrary decision-making by the department, and that the department won't be treating like manufacturers in the same manner. In other words, that the rules won't be uniformly applied. The agency did submit a conditional approval request and inserted some language that was previously suggested at the last meeting. You'll find that language on page 2 of the conditional approval request meeting packet. It says that the department will state the basis for the requirement to provide a certificate of compliance in its request to the product manufacturer. But this language doesn't resolve the committee's concerns because the rule still doesn't indicate what will trigger that request. And there's still concerns that the entities won't be treated in the same manner, basically. There won't be a uniform enforcement. Some manufacturers will receive the request and others will not. And that pretty much summarizes the concerns that we had on this proposal.
Agency comments.
Good morning, Aaron Johnson from the department.
Ann Astorita with the Department of Environmental Services.
So we understand that during the last meeting, we had concerns over the authority possibly being too broad for the way that the agency is requesting this. And it seemed like it specifically was around the guardrails on when we're going to request a certificate. So we've given that a lot of thought, and we really feel like the language we submitted with the CA request stating the basis is going to adequately respond to that and basically set up like different parameters behind it, because it's specifically saying we're stating the basis for the request of the certificate. And our thoughts on that are twofold. First being that the statute itself actually does set up specific guardrails. So the statute is limited on very specific products that are narrowly tailored for PFAS added products. Those products being food packaging, juvenile products, textile furnishings, cosmetics, and ski waxes. We do want to point out that these are the only products that we're allowed to actually request certificates of compliance on. Secondly, the language that Representative Lynn suggested last time, we like that specifically because, one, it requires the department to actually state a basis for why we're making this request. With that, we think that that is going to provide these manufacturers appropriate notice on why we're requesting this. And overall, it creates more accountability for the department. So that's why we're asking for this request.
Comments from the committee? So I'm going to speak a little bit based on our previous conversation. I think the issue is, it's not stating the basis of the requirement. The issue is that we don't have any definition in here. What are the bases that you would make a request? And I think that was the discussion point, is that while you talked about the various products, types of products that would be subject to this, but the question is the manufacturer, right? Why would you send one to one manufacturer and not another manufacturer? What's the basis for the request? And having it defined. So like, here's the reasons we can ask for this certificate. I think that was the discussion, if I remember right, is making sure that everybody was clear that in statute or in your rule, these are why we might request a certificate, having a defined reasoning why you would maybe suggest it from one maybe product manufacturer compared to another one. Why would you ask one versus another? Would you issue it to everybody? And it's unclear, I think, in the rule as to what basis you're using. What is the criteria you're using for requesting? It's about the request and making sure there's a reason for the request that's defined in your rule. So in advance, manufacturers know these are the reasons they can ask me for a certificate of compliance. If anybody disagrees or agrees, let me know if I'm clearly stating what we were talking about. I just don't think this language meets that definition of what we were looking for.
I would agree with that. There's nothing in here that says that if somebody says feminine hygiene products, if this niche manufacturer, if there's a request from maybe one of the big brands saying, we're not sure if this niche feminine hygiene product meets the PFAS standards, they need to have the department check this out. There's nothing that would require it to go for everybody, but that's also something that could be weaponized by the large companies to push out smaller companies. I get that there's a lot of uncertainty because this is a new program and you probably need to find out how you're going to do that. But just my concern is around passing something with presumptive validity that is so broad.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So if we look at the way that our statute's set up actually compared to other states, this is something that me and Ann have discussed since the last time. Our statute is actually more lenient than other states. So for example, pretty much every other state that has some sort of a ban on PFAS added products, it's a blanket. Everybody, every single manufacturer has to submit a certificate of compliance every year, and it's often associated with fees. To where New Hampshire, I think that our intent behind not doing that was to try and be less burdensome on the manufacturers, so that if it's more of a so for example, they could be selling these products before they have to even submit a request. So where we come in is only if we have a reason to have concern for, okay, you have a product that might have some sort of a hit on PFAS added. So we're more of just we're making sure we're ensuring compliance with the statute itself. But the statute itself still does have the ban on these specific products, adding PFAS to them.
Right. Again, I still just don't, I think the problem with JLCAR is that it doesn't address the issue of, to Representative Leon's point, weaponization of the statute, of the rule, right? Without a definition of, we can request a certificate if you're not in the database, right? You talked earlier about their databases of these certificates that you can just go look it up, right? So that may be a reason why you would suggest it from one manufacturer but not another, but you don't define that here, right? That the reason you can request is because they're not in the PFAS database that you have, that manufacturers have. It may be based on a complaint, right? That is there, but the problem is that you've left it so broad that it leaves way too much discretion to the agency on who it's going to ask and who it's not going to ask for compliance certificates. At least, am I stating that properly for the committee? I think that's the main concern, is that you've left it way too broad in terms of under what conditions would you request a certificate.
So a certificate of compliance, it's not an onerous thing. It is just the name and contact information of someone who can speak to the product. And it says that there are no intentionally added PFAS as of January 1st, 2027. So the way the statute's written, products manufactured before January 1st, 2027 are exempt. So it would just be afterwards. So blanket prohibition on PFAS added products that meet the New Hampshire criteria after January 1st. So everyone is supposed to be in compliance with that already. And so our request, and again, just to reiterate, the requester is part of the pollution prevention subprogram. And our goal is to reach out to the community, especially industry and manufacturers, and help them to come into compliance. So we're like a helping portion of the agency. We are not an enforcement based. So we would just be reaching out and saying, now with the new language, if it was based on a product review, a complaint, market surveillance, whatever is up in the program, we would say, could you submit a certificate of compliance? And so the folks would just submit that form in whatever format is comfortable for them, and they would email it to our group. If there was an issue with it, now again, this is all, it's so theoretical, it's kind of difficult to speak to. But if there was an issue that they had and they said something like,
we contacted the manufacturer and they found that it does have PFAS added, and we're going to return it to them. Like, we wouldn't do anything for that. I mean, we would just say, well, thank you for checking it, and we know that their certificate of compliance was not coming forward. But this program is so new, and New Hampshire's process is so different from others that it's difficult to kind of come up with some like grand reasoning for every single situation that comes up at this point. Perhaps like in a year's time, we'll have more on the ground experience and we can narrow it further and the legislators can tighten it at that point. But right now, I think that by adding, stating the basis, we're striking a balance between the administrative flexibility and regulated party notice. So the regulated party can say, well, I don't believe that this request is reasonable, and they can object to it for the reasons that we list out. So they do have like a pushback option. But at this point, making it tighter, limiting what the statute already allows more than we're already doing now by stating the basis, it restricts our flexibility to move with the program on a national basis.
Representative Lamb?
Thank you. And so just to understand, the intention of this is to make sure that you're able to operate this program in a similar way as other states that have enacted similar legislation?
Our state is less rigorous in its requirements than other states. As a matter of fact, our state from my experience, is the only one that requests 2 or more, I don't want to get too technically complicated, but 2 or more fully fluorinated carbon atoms. All the other states that I have looked at request 1, which makes it, their whole scope is broader than ours. So we really can't count on their databases because our definition of PFAS is more narrow, shall I say, than others. So we're really kind of on our own in that respect. So we can listen to what other folks have asked for, but the PFAS that is defined in New Hampshire statute already sets guardrails and protections on both people and industry because it's limited. It's the same as the Toxic Substances Control Act's definition. Other states have chosen to broaden their PFAS definition to encompass more PFAS chemicals. Ours doesn't. So we're already, if you could kind of, see, we're already kind of walking a narrow path. And by trying to think ahead as to every single circumstance where we might want to ask a certificate of compliance at this point seems premature. Again, maybe in a year's time, we'll have better knowledge. We'll have walked that path. We'll know what we should ask for, we can't ask for. But at this time, it's so new, it's difficult to set parameters on that.
So my concern is, again, the same I had before, is that the potential weaponization and the fact that, again, if you use the word could, but that's not what's used in the rule. The rule is shall. That once you make a request, they shall provide it. And if they don't provide it under the next section, 2304, then the schedule of fines, they get a $1,700 fine if they don't hand it to you within 30 days. And so that's a pretty hefty fine when we're not defining why you would give it to one manufacturer versus another.
I think there is, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think there is enforcement discretion that we do have. And the P2 program doesn't do enforcement. It would have to be escalated.
So it would say that for what the statute in your own rule says, for failing to provide the department with a certificate of compliance in 30 days of receipt in violation, the proposed fine shall be $1,750. So you may be able to reduce that fine under certain rules, but either way, they're getting a fine or a letter or some bad conduct letter in their permanent file, something, right? And so, the question is that if we're going to be allowing you to basically go after businesses, there should be a definition as to why you're making the request to begin with,
Right.
what the basic reasons are before we can weaponize this and potentially give somebody a $1,750 fine and potentially pull their products off the shelf.
So I'm just trying to think ahead. So So say that happened, say we got some kind of complaint from, even from a different state that said that they tested and they found that there were PFAS in a product. And we requested a certificate of compliance. And then I guess you're saying, and that they didn't submit one to us. What would the reason be for them not submitting it? If they were in compliance with the prohibition?
I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned again that there's no definition as to why you're asking. I think that's a legitimate reason. In this state, we found PFAS was found, so therefore we're going to ask you to provide a certificate of compliance. And if they don't, then fine, but at least you have a legitimate basis for making the request. So if you're not in the database, you make a request. We looked this up, we got a complaint, we looked it up, we can't find that you're here, we're going to submit a request. But there should be some basis for the agency to take action against a manufacturer or a supplier, other than you just feel like it.
So, two things that I'd like to point out. First being the proposed fine, that is exactly that. It could be only proposed, and ultimately we work that out through enforcement. If we were to say, hey, we might propose a fine for you if you're not submitting this. So it's not a mandatory, it's only a proposed if there's not compliance. Another thing too that I do want to point out for these is these manufacturers for intentionally added PFAS to these products, they're sophisticated manufacturers. So my point with that is they will typically know whether or not there's PFAS added to these products. So I think that within that frame, it makes it a little easier for us to actually ask that. They will know whether or not there's PFAS in this.
And to piggyback on that, with the language that we're adding, stating the basis, we are stating the basis why we're requesting it. So it could be based on a complaint or market surveillance, a product review from a different state that showed some type of testing. We would state what our basis would be based on the language that was proposed at the last JLCAR meeting.
Thank you. I guess my first question is intentionally added by whom? Is it by the end manufacturer or one of their suppliers?
By the manufacturer.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you, and you're saying that these are sophisticated manufacturers, I'd argue that rug manufacturers are not some of them are sophisticated manufacturers. There's other times when people intentionally purchase rugs that were created in a mud hut somewhere because they want to make sure that they are doing business with people that, from different areas. So the idea that everybody here is the sophisticated one is a challenge. What happens when somebody who's making a juvenile product has something where they didn't intentionally add it, but one of their suppliers did, and then they end up in this whole hook? Are we going after the less sophisticated suppliers? It's just
it's not intentional.
That's a great question. Oh,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say but that would not be intentionally added. There was a story about, for example, like Keen sneakers, and they had this great idea that they were going to take all PFAS out of their products, like proactively. And so they went through the whole process, and then they created this sneaker, and they were like, we have no PFAS in this. They tested it and there was PFAS in it. And it was from some type of process that came through, but it was not intentionally added. So that rug maker that Representative Leon said, they would not be kind of on the hook for whatever, because it's not an intentionally added PFAS product. They did not intend to add PFAS there.
I just want to get, we're not running on red. My issue is about the request. I agree with why a certificate's needed and all of that. It's about the department's request and defining that to make sure that our citizens know that these are the reasons why the agency might ask you for something and you're obligated to provide versus just a random ask. So that's my concern. So, any further questions of the agency? Any further discussion amongst the board members how we want to handle this? My inclination is to do a preliminary objection and give them 45 days to come up with some sort of language to make these requests of businesses and have a reason for making the request, considering the fine potential that's there.
I'd second that.
Well, I didn't make the motion. I want to see where the committee is and what the committee thinks.
I'm just trying to think for consistency's sake. The last rule, we had similar objections. So is there anything that would prevent us from postponing this for the 30-day period as opposed to the preliminary objection? Because I would try to.
Can I ask, oh, sorry. Can I ask, it sounds like the specific thing you're looking for is some sort of a rule saying these are the specific bases for why we would request.
Right, again, why, it's about upon request, okay, what would generate a request? Give me, that's what we're looking for. We're not arguing that the certificate's needed, right? I think everybody here is okay with the idea of requiring a certificate for manufacturing, but what would be the conditions in which the agency would make the request for the certificate and put that burden on the business? What would be the definition? Again, not in the database, a complaint, found in another state that it had contamination of PFAS. Again, those are all legitimate reasons to me to request an updated certificate from a manufacturer, a supplier, but it should be defined. There should be some definition here, not just left completely to the discretion of the agency as to when and when it's not going to ask for a certificate.
So you would want us to list every circumstance under which a certificate
Within
of
reason.
compliance could be, even though the program is brand new and.
But I mean, you came up with 3 or 4. Again, as you said, a year from now, we're
throwing it
going to
out
have
there.
a whole lot more probably. And you can be back in rulemaking and bringing them in again. But I think that it's unfair to our businesses to subject to potential fines if they don't even know what was the trigger that made you even ask.
And additionally, because you did state that it is the end manufacturer intentionally adding them, I would like on 230203, which is the definition of intentionally added PFAS, to add that as defined in the statute by the end manufacturer. Because otherwise, then you can go up the entire chain of manufacturers. And if, as you stated, you're looking at the end manufacturer, I think that clarity would be helpful now. That's something where if you need to expand the scope going forward, that could be another rulemaking change and a request on your part. But I feel like otherwise it's going to stifle a lot of manufacturers that may just not bring things to New Hampshire.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I just want you to think about a couple things. It's not the manufacturer, it's the product. Just so first, it's the product that's generated, it's not the manufacturer. So first for that one. And then the second thing is I just feel like it's such a new program and New Hampshire's is so different from everyone else's. It's going to be difficult to list every single circumstance under which a certificate of compliance can be requested. And again, that's just saying that we comply with the law. That's all the certificate of compliance is doing. It's just saying, literally, we comply with the law. And they sign it and say, we're done.
And I'd just like to note that to me, it sounded like you were discussing the intentionally added differently now than before. So I'll put that into writing to you afterwards about my concerns on that because I feel like I feel like what's being implemented is a policy that wouldn't have passed the legislature the way that we're looking into it. I want to make sure that we're narrowly focused on what did have agreement, what did pass. You can always look to expand that scope because the agencies sort of drive the rulemaking more than JLCAR does pushing back. You trying to expand the rules in the future when you understand better what you're looking for is, I think, a lot more beneficial to the public than us giving you something very broad and then trying to pull it back. As you step into a new program that is still hard to understand, hard to know how many people you're staffing, all these different questions, this will allow you to take one bite and then maybe take in a couple bites later.
Thank you.
My only concern with that is that this is a public policy statute and these products are supposed to be banned from being produced in the state. So I think my only point on that and concern on us being too narrow in stating our basis is if we box ourselves in, we may not be able to fully implement the statute as the legislature intended. So that's just my only concern with if we have to come up
You
with.
can come anytime before JLCAR and ask us to do a request for opening rulemaking, and we'll grant it. If the agency wants to reopen a rule, doesn't have legislative authority, you can come in front of JLCAR. We can, as a committee, vote to request you open rulemaking, and then that gives you the authority to open rulemaking again. So year and a half from now, you find out there are a whole bunch of conditions that you need further included in this rule. You can come before us. We'll grant you, we'll make the request to reopen rulemaking.
Would you state your motion again?
My motion is to grant waiver for the timeline requirements and to the next JLCAR meeting and to postpone this item to the next JLCAR meeting.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to postpone and waive. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Next up is the Solid Waste Management Program at DES.
Yeah, so this proposal makes some changes to the Solid Waste Management Fund. The department did file a conditional approval request, and there's just one unresolved comment to discuss. You'll find that comment on the top of page 2 of the conditional approval request meeting packet. So in the final proposal, the department amended the rules to address 2026 legislation, and that was Senate Bill 593. Which allows for the use of funds from the Solid Waste Management Fund for solid waste management districts. Neither the initial proposal nor the notice indicated that the proposal might incorporate some legislation from the 2026 session. So we've got some concerns about a notice issue. While the Senate bill had a legislative public hearing, the amendments to the rule implementing that legislation have not had a public hearing. And so there's some concern that the public is not aware that this proposal would be implementing Senate Bill 593. You will see that the agency indicated in its cover letter, which is part of the conditional approval request packet, that solid waste management districts and other stakeholders were involved in drafting of the language, and they were aware of the legislation, and they do want the amendments to the rule. However, it's not clear whether all stakeholders are aware. The agency could have done special notice and could have issued another public hearing to ensure that all impacted municipalities were aware. OLS has received some comments, and those are at the back end of the conditional approval request packet from some impacted districts, and they do support moving forward with the rules as they are now. But that is the only issue that we have with this proposal.
One second, I just want to get clear. So the issue is strictly the solid waste districts.
Yes, sir.
Inclusion of those, which wasn't in the original rulemaking in 541A public notice, but then later was added into the rule.
Yes, sir.
So as I understand before the agency speaks, I have had some conversations again. The question is whether or not they violated 541A by not including this provision of solid waste districts into it. It is an important thing. The Senate we did pass a law including that, but we did it after the rulemaking process occurred, and they tried to incorporate that into the rulemaking, which again, we think is probably a violation of 541A. So my conversations with the agency, I think we came to an agreement that we would consider passing the rule without the solid waste districts, knowing that they have a waiver process and the option for emergency rulemaking, because this is a financial impact to our communities. They can implement either one of those two solutions using their waiver requirement to be able to pay solid waste districts or entering an emergency rule. So unless the agency really wants to speak about the existing rule, my proposal would be to make a motion to approve the rule minus all language relative to solid waste districts, and then allow them to use the waiver process and the emergency rule process or further rulemaking to be able to integrate that into the rule. But I'll let the agency speak first, and then we'll jump into it.
You already spoke.
Hi, Aaron Johnson again for the department. You are correct. And Leah?
Good morning, Leah McKenna. I'm the administrator of the Solid Waste Management Bureau at DES.
So you are correct that we were planning on asking for an amended oral request to remove the solid waste districts from the final proposal, basically taking out the language from its Senate Bill 593, and then in the meantime, just allowing these districts to do a waiver. And then we'll, of course, go through regular rulemaking to incorporate this bill into the rules in the future.
The lawyers are talking and I don't want to interrupt them.
I was going to say, if the committee decided to postpone, they could do special notice and then another public hearing, and that would resolve the concern entirely.
Yeah, I think the general idea is we want to move forward because we need this issue resolved for the solid waste communities going forward. So, and they have a process they can use through their waiver process to be able to deal with the solid waste districts. So I think the idea would be let's move forward and then let them, they can do new rulemaking with the bill.
Yeah, and is it correct, Mr. Chair, that those things can happen simultaneously?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so they can automatically do the waiver process that'll allow them to do the reimbursement based on this fee that's being collected to the solid waste districts. They'd be able to use their waiver process, or like I told, they can do emergency rule. Either one, it's their choice, the agency's choice on how they want to process it. And then in the meantime, they'll also just go back into rulemaking to deal with the new law that we passed. Any further discussion? Seeing, so my motion is going to be to accept the oral amendment and remove the solid waste district language from the Senate bill out of the rule, and to pass the rule otherwise as amended.
Did you need a second? I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
And seconded by Representative Hackett Phillips. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and it is adopted. Thank you guys for coming in. Back to Health and Human Services, medical and psychiatric emergencies.
Yes, sir. So the department has filed a conditional approval request, which resolved all of the substantive issues. There is just one issue, and that is that there are 2 expired rule sections in the proposal. Both of those sections expired on July 18th of 2024, and they are about emergency admission to New Hampshire Hospital, specifically the requirement to hold an emergency hearing after involuntary admission, and on the treatment criteria for those admitted under it. From what I can tell, the statutes, those requirements are all in the statute, and so the agency was operating under that authority. The agency did submit an expired rules report, which is part of your packet, and in which they state that that they are here to answer questions, and they were operating under that authority at that time. And that's the only issue with this proposal.
Any statement from the agency? Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve 26-51. Been moved by Representative Schmidt, seconded by Senator Ward. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of conditional approval signify by saying aye. Those opposed say nay. Ayes have it, and the rule is adopted. Thank you. Homeland Security and Emergency Management, Disaster Relief Assistance for Municipalities.
So this proposal implements the Disaster Relief for Municipalities statute for the first time. The agency filed a conditional approval request, and the only reason why this proposal is not on consent is because the statute has been effective since July of 2022. So there's just, some question around the delay in bringing the rules forward, but the agency is present to answer your questions about that.
Agency comment?
Good morning. I'm Attorney Dave Hiltz from the Department of Safety. I have Director Buxton and Assistant Director Hoskins with me today. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I think the only question is why the delay in rulemaking.
Thank you.
I think the only thing to say is we were delayed. We had 8 disasters in that time period where we were working with the communities to get FEMA money out to the communities. And so the process has been a workload issue. And we're here today with the rule set as we were prepared.
Questions from the committee? Representative Leon.
Thank you. I want to clarify, were there any communities who were not offered this relief assistance between the time that we passed this and now because of the lack of rules?
All the communities after 7/1 are still eligible to apply for this program. Nobody's been blocked out.
Sorry, thank you. And then as clarification, we had passed this because of an immediate pressing need. Does this mean that anybody who's qualified, and to cover that gap in timing between when the disaster happens and when federal funds can come in? So this was intended as an initial sort of priming the pump to allow municipalities to deal with the problems on the ground. My question just is if we've left the communities in the lurch for the last 4 years.
Negative, we have not.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, entertain a motion for conditional approval on 2691. It's been moved by Representative Schallenberg, seconded by Representative Schmidt. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of conditional approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Tom, you made the minutes. Next up is the mechanical board. So apparently I goofed. 3 was the one we wanted to postpone, that we earlier postponed 241. I'm not going to undo that. I'm going to leave it, but apparently it's rule 26-3 that Senator Reardon wanted to postpone. So I'm going to make a motion to grant any waivers necessary and to postpone this till next month. Second. Been moved and seconded to postpone and waive. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. It's been postponed and waived till next month. Under other business, Department of Agriculture has 2 emergency rules. Again, emergency rules aren't something we vote on. We just take information from the agency as to what the rules are and why they're there. I can understand 14620, given what's going on in Texas and the screwworm. But maybe you can talk a little bit about the importation language. I'm assuming it's the same thing. Commissioner? Sure. I wasn't here. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Mark Prescott. I'm the state veterinarian.
Just give us a brief understanding of the emergency rules and
Sure.
need for them.
Proposed, or I guess it's emergency rule, 4200 is a list of requirements for the importation for animals affected by the outbreak of New World screwworm in Texas and actually in the southeast because it's also currently in New Mexico.
Yeah. I'm following that very closely.
Okay, it's pretty scary. I'll just leave it at that. So we've adopted rules and or we have an emergency rule that will hopefully put restrictions in place that will protect the citizens of New Hampshire and the producers as well. But at the same time allow for continued business and for business to happen. So.
And Doug, I assume this clearly falls underneath our public safety exception for the need for an emergency rule.
I would say it does.
Great. Any questions?
Yes.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So I've been following this as much as I could. And I'm wondering, you say that you're taking steps to protect New Hampshire. Is it anywhere moving out of Texas and New Mexico?
At present, there are animals that are coming out of Texas, New Mexico. What we're proposing is a series of safeguards or mitigations, in particular, an inspection of the animals, treatment of the animals, and a change in the period of validity of the certificate of veterinary inspection, which is what's required for animals to leave. So they're traditionally those.
What kind of animals are we talking about? Cattle?
We're talking about livestock, but actually the regulations address all warm-blooded animals because we've seen it in birds as well as livestock. And one of our particular concerns is dogs and cats because we receive many thousands of dogs and cats from Texas each year through our system. And we just want to make sure that when they arrive free of screwworm.
I do have a question. Is this commercial or is this private individuals also coming into the state with Texas plates on their vehicles? And
This would be all of the above. It's all of the above. Yes.
Thank you, and I want to thank you for being proactive on this. If it jumps to our wild animals, there's no stopping it. So thank you.
That's correct. Thank you.
I hadn't talked about those at the same time.
Okay.
Why don't we talk first about your first emergency rule there regarding criminal record checks and clearances?
Great. Thank you, Steve Appleby, Director, Department of Education, here with.
Julie Shea, Administrative Rules Coordinator for the Department of Ed.
So these emergency rules were brought forward because of House Bill 1051 that passed with an effective date of July 1st. And so we need emergency rules in place because private providers who we are now going to be conducting criminal history record checks will go into schools for summer session beginning July 1st. So we needed something in place for application purposes and so forth.
So, and Doug, I assume this again falls under public safety.
I think the argument is both public safety because these are special needs individuals who need these services, and also a potential argument around the impact of the finances of those who can't work unless these rules are in place.
Okay. So given those two conditions, it meets the requirement of an emergency rule. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. We're all set on that one, but the next one, we're gonna have a little conversation about 541A. So as the committee may remember, we voted back in the April meeting, I believe it was, or May or March meeting, to under my signature to request that the Board of Education open up rulemaking under two specific areas. One being amend the rules to provide clear and more specific definition of what constitutes a permissible educational expense and eligible education provider, with the goal of ensuring that EFA funds are used only for the appropriate educational expenses. So that was one area we asked them to open up and discuss, is that what are the things that we're reimbursing for? And then the second one was to amend the rules to require Department of Education to conduct biannual audit of the EFA program to reconcile EFA participants in public school enrollment for the purposes of ensuring that accounts are not funded for students ineligible for the program because they were continuously enrolled in another public education pathway. So again, this is the reconciliation process, which last time I heard we ended up with a couple $1 million that was scraped back into the education trust fund. And so given the amount of money we're talking about, we wanted that to be at least twice a year, not just once a year, and leaving that money hanging out there. The board came back with an interesting response. They sent a letter back, and I don't know if everybody has a copy of it, but the interesting thing is the second paragraph of their response. The state board has reviewed the petition and concluded that it does not meet the minimum requirements for rulemaking petition in accordance to an education rule, not the law, but an education rule that requires that we provide explicit language to what we want them to change and how we want them to change it, not just a generic topic. And I'm not quite sure, and I'm going to turn it over to Doug, but in their rule, it says, for the purpose of petition for such adoption, an amendment or repeal of the rule together with a detailed statement outlining the petitioner's request. And the Board of Education has interpreted that to mean that I have to write the rule and give it to them, and they'll decide whether they want to adopt it or not. Which is not, I think, the appropriate thing, or nor what the intent of the law was, nor does it even say it anywhere in 541A that we have this additional requirement of writing the rule for them. It just says under the law, under 541A, it says any interested party may petition the agency to adopt, amend, or repeal the rule, and within 30 days of receiving the petition, or 30 days after the next scheduled meeting of the board, commission, or group receiving the petition, the agency shall determine whether to grant or deny the petition and notify the petitioner. So they use this weird ed rule, which I don't think it meets 541A, that putting the burden on us, on the petitioner to write the rule for them in order to deny our request to open that rulemaking. So I want to hear from the agency.
Julie Shea, Administrative Rules Coordinator. I will do my best because I can't speak on behalf of the board, obviously. But at their meeting last week, I was present for the conversation in terms of what they were talking about with rulemaking. And I don't know what the scope is in terms of the 200 rules, which is where those are located. So it's the procedural rules. They're old because they don't expire. And so I don't know when those were written or by whom.
2011.
I actually think it was 2005.
The 2005. these were
Yes.
Oh, 2005.
Yep. And that was acknowledged during the meeting as well, that the rules probably do need to be updated. And I think as far as precedents, they have received one other rulemaking petition since I've been at the agency that was denied for that reason. And so that was why they denied this one. But more importantly, they were looking for, it was such a nuanced reason in terms of the rules, because they do need to be updated. This is ED 800. But they would like to be able to update them once the audit is over so that they can address all of the issues.
Comments from the committee?
Thank you. So I find the 200 rules that require the specific language and the similar requirements in 200 rules in a number of other agencies is entirely problematic, and maybe a reason why we may want to consider not having the 100 and 200s come before JLCAR. We need to figure out some way that these just can't dwell on a shelf. And see what the right process is. That's probably something we can discuss on a day where it is not about to become noon. But I think that's important. But I think that more importantly, I do think the idea of waiting for that performance audit to finish before undertaking rulemaking does make a lot of sense, because rulemaking is by need a detailed process, and starting it when you know that a performance audit is about to come out and you will do rulemaking, I have a hard time putting that kind of burden on rule writers.
And the agency and the board acknowledged that at the meeting, that when rulemaking is taken up, we want to make sure that it's done properly and that they're not thrown together, and that there's really time taken to make sure that they're done in a way that actually reflects the operations and procedures as they should be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just be interested to hear from the OLS attorneys in terms of maybe generalities, in terms of, where rules stand on legal interpretation, in terms of what law might constrain a rule, or, in terms of, and furthermore, if you have any interpretation about the back and forth.
So I think this is a really interesting issue, and I think if this letter had come to us with the audit piece, it may not have flagged it to me. So I come from the perspective, I was general counsel for 2 agencies before coming to OLS, and part of my role was to answer these rulemaking petitions. So when we got the response and I saw that Ed 215 that said, we're going to deny this without looking at the petition on the merits solely because you didn't provide us, requester, with the language you want in place, I actually had a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to that, because it is my opinion that that goes beyond the scope of 541A.41 and puts really an undue and unnecessary burden on the individual requesting or making that request for the adoption of rules, right? One of the reasons we do a rulemaking authority for agencies is because they have that subject matter expertise. And suppose it wasn't the JLCAR, which actually kind of creates its own separation of powers issue, but it's sort of unique to us. But if it was, say, my wife who wanted to make this petition, the agency's response would be, even though we have the informational knowledge, even though we have the subject matter expertise, we know the internal workings of the DOE, without looking at the merits of the request, we're going to deny it on this technicality because you didn't provide us with a rule. And also, the question in my mind is, what is the threshold? If I just said a rule, you shall audit once a year, does that meet the threshold, or is that not enough? Right. So what I think, my perspective, having answered these in the past, is that these requirements go beyond, like I said, what was the intent of 541A, which is to give anybody the opportunity to have an agent take action, especially when they already have potentially the responsibility in law to do so. So then once I found that question, Attorney Ricard tried to throw me under the bus, and we looked at a couple of different agencies. One of the first ones she pulled up was the OPLC, and we do not have that requirement, or they do not me. that requirement in the OPLC. I provided a couple of examples in that packet today. Employment security has a very good one. And there's just more, we will accept a draft, but also a reasonable understanding, right? Because I think the agencies need to be able to do that. They have to say, we have to know what the purpose of the rulemaking is. That seems reasonable. But to me, my interpretation was above and beyond that, requiring a draft is too much and in violation of the statute. So we put together a couple of examples in this packet of rules that could potentially be problematic and rules that I deemed good, just for lack of a better word. I think one of the issues, and we've discussed that today, is that it's very often easier to go forward than to go back. And so the rules that are problematic have been approved by JLCAR, and there is presumptive validity there. So unless they're challenged, those are valid rules short of legislative change. So this is sort of where my mind went when I saw this denial. And I'm not saying, I'm not really speaking to the merits, right? We've already kind of addressed the waiting for the end of the audit is a response I would have given. I think it's a very reasonable response. But this rule piece of it really flags something for me. And then I will also say, before I made this issue public and before I brought it to the chair and vice chair, I did discuss it with the team. And I think we are all in agreement that if similar language to what the state board has now, we will be flagging that going forward as going beyond the scope of 541A41. So the agencies are kind of on notice from this point, but where it hasn't been problematic, and again, to your point, Representative Leon, the first three examples we pulled up, 2005, 2007, 2010, these are very old rules, and we've been with them for 20 years. But I take a very different perspective having done this role, and I think the attorneys at OLS agree. And so that's something we'll be flagging going forward.
This question is for the department, I suppose. When do we anticipate the audit report to be
I can answer that.
completed? I'm sorry.
I'm on the
Thank you.
performance audit committee, so it's first quarter of next year. We had that come out. It was originally scheduled to come out a little bit before that, but we added two things to the scope over in the performance audit committee. One of the things we were concerned about was the expansion when we went to the universal process. Are we scooping in any out-of-state students that are in private school that are somehow getting through the cracks? And so we wanted residency requirements to have a review of how the CSA, the Child Scholarship Organization, is making sure that doesn't happen. And it was a second request, and I forgot what it was. The second, but we asked them to expand the scope of the audit over at the LBA Audit Division to include these two new provisions. And they're working it out between the agency and the audit division now to do that. But the expansion pushed it into the first quarter of next year because it's a big ask to look through and take a look at those kind of requirements.
Thank you. And I had also gone to the Performance Audit Review Committee to try and get another one in the queue. There's so many there that it was better just to expand this now instead of having one and going back for the additional information.
All right. Just know we're going to be looking at the 200 rules and figuring out whether statutorily we have to change something next year or not. That these kind of rules that are obviously, again, 541 has changed a couple of times, and this is a stagnant rule from 2005, right? That's not being updated, and in my opinion, exceeds we would never approve that rule because it's outside of the current law, making that requirement on people who are petitioning. I thought we were pretty clear in our two asks, very narrow, clear. Look at what we're spending money on, and look at the money we're spending, whether they should be holding it or not. It was a pretty narrow scoped argument. I'll concede to the audit answer is fine, but I was not happy with the 200 rule answer that they gave me. And any agency, because that's the whole point of doing a rule. If I've got to write the rule, right, and then they look at the rule and they go, well, I don't like the way that's written, so we're going to deny it. Because I didn't have the subject matter expert experience to write the rule properly, right? So asking people who are potentially not subject matter experts to write rules and then defining whether you're going to approve a rule adoption or not based on this, I won't say unprofessional, but necessarily not an SME writing a rule is kind of ridiculous, so, for our citizens. So, okay. Anything else come before JLCAR? Doug, are we all set? All right, so, with that, business of the day being done, we are adjourned.